So welcome. I built this PC over there, and there was two reasons or two goals that I wanted to achieve when building this. First of all, I wanted it to be better than the 2019 Mac Pro, the cheese grater Mac Pro. Everyone's talking about it, so I wanted it to be better than that. Second of all, I wanted it to kind of slot on the category of best bang for buck video editing PC. And this is exactly what we're talking about over here. I want to go through part by part and my thinking behind it and my research behind it of why I think this is one of the best bang for buck machines out there. I'm also going to list some of the alternative parts if you can obviously go higher and lower and things like that, and some of the features you don't need, then I recommend upgrading certain things. So stay tuned. It's probably going to be a bit long video, but there's a lot of helpful information out there that you're going to hear from here now. So first of all, we're talking about the CPU, which is probably the most important part when building a PC. It's like the brain, or it does the most inside the PC. And for years, it's been the rivalry between two companies, AMD and Intel, and the obvious choice has been for years, Intel. Until last year when AMD released their third generation of Ryzen processors, and suddenly AMD is producing more bang for buck processors and they're performing really good. So inside there, I'm actually rocking the Ryzen 3900X, which is a 12-core processor for around 450, something like that. Now, if you look, something that is rivalry coming from the Intel part is a bit older processor, which is the 9900K, and it's 8-core processor, so we're losing on cores, we're losing on threads, we're losing on cache, we're losing on base clock speeds. On paper, it's losing on everything, and it's slightly more expensive as well. But now when we look at the Puget Systems actual benchmarks that they did on Premiere Pro, 9900K is slightly higher than the 3900X. So you're thinking, why did you go with this processor instead of the Intel one then? So there was a few reasons, and there's more to the story than that, because if you're using it outside of the application, this one is a much more powerful processor than the Intel one. But also, if you can upgrade to the 3950X, Ryzen 3950X processor, then you're absolutely whooping everything. But that is around $700 or $750 processor, which is a little bit more expensive. So for that reason, I thought if I want to upgrade a little bit later, I'm gonna go for the lower one at the moment and save a little bit of money over there. So there were a few things that made me choose this 3900X. Then one of the main ones was also the PCI Gen 4 support on this processor, which means that if you're gonna use some of the SSDs or NVMe storage out there, you're gonna get much faster disk write and read speeds and other extras you want to plug into the PCI slots, because there's much faster data transfer speeds going on over there. And also, I think there's more upgrades kind of coming from the AM4 socket, because I can go for the 3950X, which is absolutely awesome processor. So that's been my thinking on the CPU side, okay? So I'm still saving around $50 when going with this processor instead of the Intel one, and there's more better features and things like that, and they're pretty much neck to neck with each other. So related to the CPU, next one, what's in there is the cooler. Okay, it's very popular to go with the, you know, AIO and have water cooling and loads of RGB and flashy lights, which I didn't want my PC to look like a Christmas tree. I wanted it to look slick, stealth, black and white. That's what this style is. But apart from that, I wanted it to be cool, and I wanted it to have stable performance on the processor. So the thing is that the 3900X CPU actually comes with a cooler inside the packet, and you can use it and it's perfectly fine and performs rather well. The only thing is that it might start thermal throttling when you're using the PC on a full load, rendering something out or things like that. And you know, when you're working in this industry, you know that time is money, so every minute you can save on it is just, you know, key, especially when it comes down to cooling. But I didn't want the water cooling as well, because sometimes when the pump on the water cooler goes, you don't really know that your cooler is broken. You might just completely wreck your CPU because, you know, your cooler is not actually working and you don't know that. But with air cooling, and what I went for, just to save you from suspense, is the Noctua NHU15 and the Chroma Mux. So it's a big cooler with two towers, and 2 fans inside, and it's all completely black, which is just absolutely fantastic. I think it looks really cool, and it also performs very, very well. You can watch Linus's video up there, and you can see that this is like actually outperforming some of the Corsair, you know, big radiator IIO water coolers, which is very, very surprising. Now this costs around 99 or 90 pounds or dollars, something like that, but you can actually save around $30 or so when going with the brown version or the, you know, usual chrome and brown version of the fans. But I just couldn't do it. I wanted to look at my PC and, you know, think it looks good as well, so I kind of squeezed the extra 30 out to get the chroma black version. Next up is the motherboard, the kind of place where all the parts come together and get united. Now I am rocking the MSI X570 Creation Prestige Creation motherboard over there, which is definitely not the cheapest motherboard out there. Absolutely not. I paid, I think, 420 for it, but the price varies and things like that. By the way, I've left all the links in the description if you want to check out the parts I've used, and also the alternatives. The links are below. So the question is, why did you go with this motherboard? It's so expensive. Now, when we're talking about video editing and workstation PCs, there are a few features that are absolutely key. So for example, for me, I think it's a key to have a 10 gigabit Ethernet port out there. If you're using a NAS storage, this is absolutely essential. If you don't have that, you're gonna have to buy an extra PCIe card, and it might cost you even more. Second of all, we want Wi-Fi, built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and we want a lot of USB ports that are fast and USB-C ports, because there's a lot of, you know, creators, tools and things that we need to plug in with USB and using all, you know, pads and pens and different tab, you know, things like that. You know better than I do. So I actually calculated that if I went with a cheaper motherboard and then bought an extra, you know, PCIe card of the 10 gigabit Ethernet ports and then Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and things like that, I would actually spend more money than going with this one. Also, if you're doing video creation and you want like a different cache and project drives in there, all super fast on PCIe Gen 4 transfer speeds, then this is completely possible with this one, because you can have up to 4 M.2 PCIe Gen 4 slots on the motherboard. It actually comes with an expansion card. There's 2 inside over there, and then there's 2 on the motherboard. But the expansion card is cool because if you put 2 in there and you don't need them, if you don't need 4 separate ones, you can actually run those 2 in RAID and then have ridiculously high data transfer speed. So if you have, for example, 2 Sabre and Rocket SSDs in there on a RAID, it gets ridiculous, okay? It's absolutely ridiculously fast. So all these features made me choose this motherboard. Now, if you don't need, for example, the 10 gigabit Ethernet ports and maybe built-in Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or things like that, you can go with a cheaper one and save around 270 pounds or something like that, which I'm gonna leave one example in the description as well. Which is just the MSI Gaming Plus, X570 Gaming Plus, I think it was called. Now, if you just saved around 200 or 70 on the motherboard, then what I'd recommend you do is invest that back into the processor. Go with the Ryzen 3950X and you're getting 16 cores, and it's absolutely beast of a processor. It's just ridiculous, okay? That whoops most of the Intel's line on Premiere Pro. So if you don't need the 10 gigabit Ethernet port and maybe some of the features and so many ports, definitely put that money into the CPU and go with that one. I'm rocking 64 gigabytes of 32 megahertz Corsair Vengeance memory inside there. It's DDR4. So I went with 2 times 32 gigabyte DIMM sticks. So I have 2 occupied on the motherboard, and then I have 2 spare slots, which means that if I wanted to, I can upgrade this PC to in the future to the maximum supported memory on this CPU and motherboard, which is 128 gigabytes of RAM. So any of you out there who are doing 8K video editing, if you go with the 3950X processor, you should also go with 128 gigabytes of RAM. That's what's been recommended. If you're using 8K video editing, then you should definitely upgrade the 4 slots, all 4 times 32 gigabytes of RAM. Now, it's also very important that you check the megahertz that the RAM is on, because the Ryzen processors are very much influenced by the RAM speeds. 3200 is probably like the sweet spot. You don't want to go any lower, or if you go higher, you can, but you don't really need to. You don't get that much performance increase when going higher. So this is kind of the sweet spot of going for. If you don't need 64 gigabytes of RAM, which you don't actually need, let's say you do only 4K editing and you just got usual editing setups, you know, nothing crazy, nothing fancy, 32 gigabytes is actually fine. I've got my old one over there, which is just perfectly fine. I've run it on 32 gigabytes for ages and it's still perfectly fine, and even when I'm rendering and editing, I'm still not maxing it out, so it's perfectly fine. Now, you have 2 options. You can either go for cheaper and go for 4 times 8 gigabits DIMM slots, or 2 times 16 gigabyte DIMM sticks, which means that you have a little bit of upgrade option. So I would recommend you going for the 2 times 16 gigabytes, because then later you can double it and have 64 gigabytes of RAM, just so you have some few upgrade options out there and you don't have to throw your old sticks away. Obviously, it depends. If you really need to save the money and the 4 times 8 gigabytes are cheaper, then go with that. Now, while we're talking about a quick comparison to the Mac Pro, is that the Mac Pro, you know, the starting price is 6 grand and it comes with 32 gigabytes of RAM actually, and it runs on 2666 megahertz. But the Mac Pro has the ECC memory, which, if you don't know what it is, you don't need it basically. But if you do need ECC memory, there are a few options out there. This motherboard out there, or my motherboard, doesn't support the ECC memory. So if you want the ECC memory, you might want to go with a different motherboard. So next up is the GPU. And as much as we want the GPU to give us more power and more performance on Premiere Pro, it doesn't actually increase the performance as much, because only certain things are supported by the GPU acceleration. So if you're using a lot of After Effects, which is more performance is supported through the GPU, and you're using a lot of effects on Premiere Pro that are supported by the CUDA Core, you know, Mercury playback acceleration, then it's worth, you know, looking at some better GPUs out there. But if you don't include a lot of, you know, GPU based effects or things like that on your editing workflow, then you're not actually getting that much of an increase in Premiere Pro when going with the more expensive GPU. Now, if you're on Davinci Resolve, that is completely different, because Davinci Resolve program is actually able to much more utilize the GPU and get you better performance if you have a better GPU. So if you're editing on Davinci Resolve, it's more beneficial to go with a higher GPU because you get actual performance increase. So what I'm rocking over there is the 2060 Super, RTX 2060 Super by Gigabyte, because I just found that Gigabyte was the cheapest option out there and it was just the most bang for buck kind of thing. Now, when I'm looking at the Puget systems, and they did the test on the graphics cards as well and things like that, then this is, I think, kind of the sweet spot. And when you go to the 2070 Super or 2080 Super or 2080 Ti, then it only slightly increases the performance for you, and it's not significant improvement when comparing the price, because the price just doubles very, very easily. 2080 Ti is like 3 times or 4 times the price of our 2060 Super. So I thought, I'm not gonna spend more than half of this, you know, PC build on a GPU, because I'm not actually getting that much of a performance. It's much wiser to spend it on a CPU and maybe some of the motherboard features and, you know, SSD and things like that, than actually putting it on the GPU side. If you are using Davinci Resolve or more After Effects and more GPU accelerated effects, just see what your budget allows. 2060 Super, 2070 Super, 2080 Super, 2080 Ti, this is kind of what I would go for. and you're thinking, what about AMD and what about Radeon and what about their GPUs? At this point, the NVIDIA GPUs are still better on Premiere Pro and give you better performance on Premiere Pro, so I wouldn't be looking at them at this point in time. It's also about the video memory. If you're not doing 8K editing, you're completely fine with cards up to 8 gigabytes. So if you are doing 8K video editing, it is recommended to get GPU that has around 10 gigabytes or more video memory. And that is based on Puget Systems testing on GPUs and different working, how they do it. So just so you know, if you're editing 8K, you'll probably be looking at something like 2080 Ti or 2080 Super, or maybe even Titan, something that is a bit, you know, more beefier GPU. So SSD and storage, what I went with was the Sabrent Rocket 1 terabyte SSD, which is a PCI Gen 4 drive, NVMe drive, which means that I'm getting super fast read speeds. Now you could go with the usual, you know, Samsung 9070 Pro or something like that, but just whichever SSD you go for, I would recommend just make sure that it is PCIe Gen 4 support on it, which means you're gonna get much faster transfer speeds. I think this Sabrent Rocket is probably one of the best bang for buck SSD out there in terms of reliability, performance and price. That's why I went with that one. Now you don't need 1 terabyte drive for the OS drive or boot drive. You can actually go for 500 gigabytes as well. Now I wouldn't go for 250 because I think you're a little bit struggling over there. I think 500 is probably good. I went with 1 terabyte because if I wanted to, I could put some of the smaller projects also on the boot drive and then just edit them off there. Now you might be asking, what about hard drives, and don't you add any hard drives on there on this system, and why didn't you include any other storage in this system? Now that solely depends what workflow are you on. Let's say if you have NAS storage, you're probably completely fine with just this. Plug in your NAS in the back and you're perfectly fine. You might edit on NAS, but you still prefer to have your project cache files or actual project on your actual PC. Then, you know, get another that Sabrent Rocket drive and plug it onto another M.2 slot on the motherboard. If you want another one, maybe get another one and put it on the PCIe expansion card that comes with the motherboard. So this is all up to you. Maybe you need hard drives in there and you already got some hard drives that have been laying around from your previous PC, then just slot the hard drives in there and then off you go. This case also allows you to have up to 6 hard drives on there. It's already built in. You can upgrade it to 8 if you wanted to. There's 2 more slots that you can upgrade to. And then you have 3 SSD drives on the back, which are 2.5-inch drives if you wanted to. And then, like I mentioned, the NVMe M.2 slots on the motherboard. So there are a lot of hardware storage options inside the case and on the motherboard. It just depends what you want. I'm looking to upgrade myself into maybe NAS storage, but you need to pay a little bit of money to get there. I found that a good, cheap solution out there is what Matthew Monitz was talking about, so I'll leave a video up there. Check that out. Very helpful video. I've got to mention the power supply unit, which is probably not the most exciting thing to talk about or about the parts, but inside there is the Corsair RM650. Now you could actually power it also from 650, you completely fine, but I just went with 750 because the price difference was only like 8 quid or something like that. Hardly anything, but with this one, I have maybe more future upgrade options. Now, if you have gone with maybe some of the beefier graphics cards and you may be looking in the future to upgrade yourself into even beefier graphics cards, then you'd probably want to get maybe a more powerful power supply unit. Maybe something like a 1200 watts or 1 kilowatt, things like that. But there isn't that much of a big price difference even if you go a higher one and want to put yourself a future safe. But just so you know, if you're not thinking about upgrading in the future, there is no point of getting like a more powerful one because you just won't need it unless you want to use this for your next build as well. The last thing about this is the case. And why did I go with this case and things like that? So all the parts that I went through, they are better than Mac Pro's, 6K entry Mac Pro machine. It's better in CPU, GPU, SSD. Mac Pro has Thunderbolt ports, This has more USB 3 ports. They're kind of equal. Both of them have 10 gigabit Ethernet and Wi-Fi, Bluetooth built in, things like that. So they're kind of equal. But now the case, I wanted something that can actually compete with when we talk about Mac Pro killer. Whoa! And then also be a slick case, looking cool, and then quite cheap. So this case is around 120, something like that. It's Corsair Carbide 678C case, full tower E-Atx. It's big. It's quite a big case, but I wanted something that is big because I didn't want to build something that is small and everything just, you can't put the cables in. It gets stressful. So there are a few actual reasons why this case actually gives you a better performance as well. So first of all, it is quiet because it's got some noise insulation inside. It's just a quiet case, okay? Because it's big, there's more airflow that goes through it, which means the fans can, you know, work on a lower RPM, which makes this case even quieter, because obviously we don't want something that's just spinning up really loud, spinning up really loud. I wanted it to be also be quiet. So that's another reason for it. Second of all, or whatever, third, fifth, 100 of all, it's got a lot of filters on it, which keeps the case clean. When we're looking at the Mac Pro, it actually doesn't have any filters in anywhere. So whatever edge goes in, all the dust just gets blown through the computer and there's nothing protecting it. Whereas this one has a filter in the front, on the bottom, on the top. So it's just filtering the air that gets sucked in and pushed out from the back, which I think is good. Also, because it's big enough, it's a very nice experience to build it because everything just fits in and you have loads of room to do everything. And if you want to have your hard drives in, you can put your hard drives in. The Mac Pro actually doesn't have any space for the hard drives to go in. If you want it, you have to buy some extra things and you can only have a certain amount, I think 2 or 3. Whereas this one, easily 6. Do you want to put 8 hard drives in there and 6 SSDs? No problem. And then another 4 Ender 2 slots, no problem at all. And it also looks slick. It's white, it's got white and black design, and it's just good quality as well, and very good price for the performance. So that's my thinking behind why this case, why these parts. So I know this has been quite a long video, but I wanted to give you all the information that I found out about, you know, building the best bang for buck video editing machine out there. And I hope, you know, this kind of helped you, guide you. If you want to do it, then this is, you know, helping you. Also, if you maybe not so confident about building a PC, but you're really interested and you really like to get one, or maybe you can't really afford something pre-built, or you can't afford Mac, then don't worry. I've got also a video coming out, or if maybe it's already out there, but I've already filmed the video where how I built this PC, and I'm going through every single stage of the video or building this, so if you can just watch it and then build your own, and you shouldn't have any problems building exactly the same system. I've left all the parts in the description as well, so if you're thinking, oh, what was this, what was he talking about, I've left everything below, also the alternatives, so you can be sure that you get the exact parts and they all work together and you're not accidentally buying a wrong part. Now, I've left in the description all Amazon links, and I think why buying Amazon is a good idea is because when I built this one, I accidentally clicked on a wrong power supply unit when I bought mine. I made a list of all the, you know, parts I need to buy, but accidentally into the basket, I don't know how it happened, I put a wrong power supply unit. So now when it came, and I didn't realize until I was actually mounting the power supply unit, and when you watch the video how I built this, you'll see it, and I was like, it doesn't work because it doesn't have, you need like kind of 2 8-pin CPU cables, but this power supply didn't have it. The good thing was, because I bought it off Amazon, I returned my power supply unit the same day, and then next day I already had another one in my hand, because the Prime service, next day delivery, it was just good and awesome. Just whenever these things happen, you don't have to wait around, it's very fast service, I like it. And by the way, it's not much more expensive than anywhere else. Could have made like 10 videos out of this, but this is all the information I'd like to give you out there. Now, if you have any other questions, I'll meet you in the comment section below. I'd really appreciate if you like this video, because it actually makes a difference. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. I'll meet you in the comment section below. Bye bye.